Hello, welcome to a music arts video or a music arts ranking channel um, review. And tonight, as it is quite late, I'm going to be reviewing classic DC films. This is part one. I'll do some of them on this video and some of them later. And I use the word film or films rather than movies because some of them are TV shows, some of them are movies, of course. All of my Marvel ranking is movies, and although Marvel may have made more classic movies than DC, DC are much better at making TV shows, or better TV shows have been made of DC characters, or with DC characters in them. Anyway, to start off, I'm going to start with the very first. There are a few serials with ostensibly for children, Batman and Superman serials shown in the cinemas. But I'm going to start with the first major one, first classic serials, and it is Batman, the original Batman series from the 60s. I don't know whether you can see this clearly or not. I'll have to check later. Anyway, classic DC. Some of it's classic DC, some of it's not. What do I mean by classic DC? Well, first of all, it has to be good superhero stories, good movies and good TV shows. Yes, it has to be written well and performed well, and it has to have morals and messages too. For example, what it means to be a hero, the morality of killing, which is rather ambiguous throughout, but interesting, and other moral situations. And this is the Adam West incarnation of the Batman. It's good for kids to watch as well as adults. And the first season is arguably the very best or the most classic DC. In the first season, there's a unique fictional world created with different laws within it to what we think of as the real world. And yet a lot about it, about the events within it, informs about human nature. The Batman himself is a character, an atavistic character from deep within. The balancing force, if you like. And then there's an array of supervillains, and they all tend to be psychotic or schizoid. And they're not the Jungian archetypes, but there's a sort of elaboration of Jung going on. They're archetypes from the negative side of the human mind, sort of subconscious manifestations, or conscious imagined manifestations of certain negative uh, parts of human nature, if you like. And the Batman is the kind of force from deep within, which in the fiction balances out the forces. The darkness of the Batman with his cowl and his cape is just the force of the Batman. As a character, he has an enlightened mind. He's a progressive liberal thinker. Also, he respects the institutions of society and law, order, and truth, much like the Republicans. So he's a sort of representative, ideologically, of America in many ways. Now, you have to forgive a lot for the time. They couldn't make him into the muscly character of more recent film. It would have looked silly with the sort of costumery that was available in those days. There's a lot of silliness and zaniness and humour in it, and some impossible things. But the character, the central character of the Batman, with essentially his weapon, I suppose, Robin, but also basically his son, his ward, and serves to sort of add realism, if you like, within an extremely fictional world. Fictional world it's a new world, every bit as distinctive as Tolkien's or Charles Dickens. And in fact, it was Tolkien that wrote about, in his literary theory, about what he called the willing suspension of disbelief, which is what is necessary to enjoy fiction. So while you're watching a fiction or reading a fiction, or hearing a fiction indeed, you have to exercise the ability to suspend disbelief in order to benefit from and enjoy the work of fiction. Have I said enough about that? Anyway, this character of the Batman is established. It follows closely to the comics of the time. I've got quite a few of the comics at the time in a big showcase bumper edition, which isn't coloured, unfortunately, but it's still worth reading. And then they take it even further and create a new psychology. Right. Now, the second season is almost the opposite. It's not very well done. The character of the Batman is compromised. The villains stopped being psychotics and just become sort of eccentrics. The Batman does some really silly things, like, for example, there's a scene when he mocks and disrespects the customs of the Native Americans, which the Batman of the first season, and indeed the third season, as I'll come to later, would never have done, with his belief in the brotherhood of man and his altruism. And there are other examples in season 2 of that. That's the one that sticks in my mind, about the Native Americans. So he becomes part of the side of the establishment that he couldn't possibly agree with. The true character of the Batman couldn't possibly agree with. But there are a few stories from the episode called The Zodiac Crimes through to Batman's Waterloo. Just a few episodes that fit in with the first season, and this fictional world is created again. Perhaps it was filmed, perhaps those episodes were filmed before the other ones. But anyway, so season 2 is mostly not classic DC. The third season is a different story again, and I am holding it as my classic DC. It's slick superhero stories. The villains are all well defined. The Batman regains his and even extends or expands on his character. As I said, the villains are clearly defined and all quite distinct. The Riddler's even more intelligent than before, extremely intelligent, very almost confusing watching the story. And there are only 2 psychotic characters, or perhaps 3. The Joker and King Tut. It does nearly go into hot water with a story where Mrs. Clavicle, who also turns out to be psychotic, uses the women's rights movement to take control of Gotham City. But then she turns out to be an evil criminal, and the Batman has to stop her by a totally implausible means. But he never mentions anything about women in it, so the whole thing is saved. It's totally implausible. There are impossible things and unlikely things, and it's extremely funny. But even with all that, there is the danger and presently the threat of death in it, made quite believable by Batman and Robin. The other characters are well written as well. Commissioner Gordon and Chief O'Hara and all the other supporting characters. And there's the addition of Batgirl, Barbara Gordon. Weird thing, there's some really weird high tech, which are a bit forward looking. The use of computers extensively, for example, and some of the technology is totally absurd. But I swear that in one of the scenes, there's a laptop in Barbara Gordon's library. Just for a few seconds, it's there. So, the stories are very good. There's a kind of logic, a sort of internal logic, if you like, in the adventure series to the stories. Some good plots. What else have I to say about this? Oh, it's fun to watch. And if I have any advice or anything to add about James Gunn's forthcoming reboot of the DCU, I would say make sure that it's fun to watch. That the new DCU films are fun to watch. If you can make the new films as fun to watch as this, of season 3 and season 1, of course, then he's lost half. He's won half the battle there. Batman's character in season 3 is great. I'll just give you a couple of examples, quotes. One quote, there's lots of examples of this, but I'll just give you a couple of examples. One quote, he says, "Morals are the stuff that men are made of." And another one, "To err is human, to forgive divine." So there we have it. Now the next, so season 1 and season 3, maybe a little bit of season 2. The next item, there was a Flash. It's not the Flash TV series. That's good. It's good TV. It's not quite classic DC. It's a bit plodding, a bit drab, comparatively anyway. Has great moments. I mean, the Wesley Shipp, the ones with Wesley Shipp as the Flash. The next item is the Superman movies that I have in this box set. Here. I'm counting Superman 1, 2 and 3 as classic DC. Not Superman 4, Quest for Peace. So there's a great theme, it has great potential. There's some huge holes in the storyline errors, huge holes in the storylines, but I won't go into those. There's more than one per DVD case, and this was just such a wonderful thing. I remember when I first saw it many years ago, I was bowled over. Christopher Reeve as Superman. The film industry had got so far that they could depict people flying through the air, and to see Superman, that you read in the comics, flying through the air, and the whole thing was dramatized very well. Great story and a great fantasy world. Krypton, from which Superman came, of course, sent as a baby and adopted by the Kents. And he grew up to be a character and finding his place in the world. And as I said before about the Batman serials, these movies are just great fun to watch. They're along the lines of the comics again. And it's just seeing his powers and everything. I mean, when you're watching this, it maintains the world of Superman perfectly. Great fight sequences. And Lois Lane, great, even though she's a smoker, she's great. Great supporting cast. Great villains, General Zod. And then there's the couple of guys with the gadgets. And Superman with his sort of dark side. Question of what it means to be a hero. That question is there, and it's apparent throughout the 3 films. So Superman 1, Superman 2, and Superman 3. Right. Next one, logical spin-off. Supergirl. Now this has been criticised heavily, but it's a logical and clear spin-off from the Superman stories. It's just as wonderful to see Helen Slater flying, especially when she escapes from Argos City, and she's learning to fly, and she's just relishing the feeling and the power of flying around. It's great to see her discovering her powers, as it was in the Superman films, and Superboy was running through the fields and leaping over barns and so on. It has the Selina character, the witch Selina, in it. Her arch enemy, Supergirl's arch enemy, of course. And it ties in with the Superman world. It's straightforwardly the same world as the Superman films. because he's away in another galaxy or something like that. Peter Cook has a great role in it. And well, this just serves to emphasise that it is fun to watch. It is great fun, great adventure story. She's a heroine. She has to struggle in various ways. She has to escape from the Phantom Zone. And I don't really need to go into any more details about this. Great cinematography, the colours, lighting. Yeah. Helen Slater in Supergirl. Pity there wasn't a sequel. But there we are. Oh, I didn't mention the Batman movie. That's just as great as the TV show, the first Batman movie, with the same cast as the TV show. That's also worth watching, from the 60s, in which Riddler, Joker, Catwoman and Penguin join forces to hijack the United Nations in a totally implausible and impossible way. But it works. It's great as a story. The next DC film, classic DC film, is Tim Burton's Batman. I have a copy somewhere, but I seem to have misplaced it. It's a very bland cover anyway. It's just a circle, ellipse with a bat insignia in it. And in a way, it's an updating of the 60s TV serials. With the body armor and with the extra gadgets and the Batmobile. I don't think the Batmobile's quite as impressive. I think the first Batmobile is the most impressive Batmobile, still probably the definitive Batmobile. But it's still a good Batmobile in the Tim Burton Batman film. The character's well established in it. He's starting out as Batman. There's mention of the death of his parents. There's even scenes showing the death of his parents that led to him becoming the Batman and fighting crime. They were killed, shot by a thief. This was only mentioned for about a few seconds in the original Batman series, but anyway, that was well acted. This is also well acted, and it's a big movie version. That was a bit more realistic. We're in a gangster-ridden Gotham City, and of course, there is possibly the best thing about the film, Jack Nicholson's portrayal of the Joker. It's a Joker origin story too. He falls into a vat of chemicals, and it scars him for life, and obviously drives him even more mad than he was before. And he's definitely psychotic. He acts it very well. He's very much the gangster. He kills his boss, and who actually double crossed him over a woman, and then he takes over the gangs simply by being nasty and murderous, of course. And there are all sorts of big cinematic depictions of the Joker's pranks. But the Batman with this wonderful bat plane stops his last gambit. It's a bit updated in the sense, probably still okay for kids to watch, but it's been updated and there's some sex with Kim Basinger on it, Bruce Wayne and Vicky Vale. It's not awfully graphic. So there we have it. Batman's moral certainty is never compromised in this film. His psychology is a bit more, as it were, on his sleeve, or on the film sleeve, really, rather than on his sleeve. The origins of the Batman, and the death of his parents, and so on. Right. The next one is The Batman Begins. Now, I saw the other Tim Burton film, and I felt that the Batman's character had just become a little bit compromised or weakened in the second film. It's a great film, but it's not quite classic DC. And the Joel Schumacher, I think I've got that right, films afterwards. I'm sure they were an attempt to recapture the flavour of the TV of the '60s serial, particularly season 3. But the Batman's character isn't consistent enough. There's no exposition of his personality or his character. So for me, they're not classic DC either. They're not as much fun to watch as season 3 of the original serial, original series. But this Christopher Nolan film serves as a great introduction to the Batman, and it's updated to sort of dark, again gangster-ridden Gotham City. Bruce Wayne's journey from being an embittered socialite. He's a socialite, but he's also an embittered character because of the death of his parents. In fact, he intends to kill the man that shot his parents, but he doesn't get to because someone else does it first, beats him to it. And he spends some time in the East being trained by Ra's al Ghul and his organisation before he becomes Batman. And there was always something a bit supernatural about Batman. He did things that were a bit more than human, perhaps. In fact, although it's quite funny scene in the original series in season 3 of the Batman series. There's a scene where Batman explains how he's an adept yogi, and he studied under some sage of the East, whose name I can't remember. It's an implausible sort of Eastern sounding name, I suppose. And this almost explains the sort of supernatural qualities of the Batman, in that he's studying in the East, presumably Tibet, I don't know, but under this Ra's al Ghul character, where he learns all the arts of the ninja, in fact every sort of art really, including the arts of concealment and things that are just a little bit impossible. And this prepares him, of course, to become the Batman. And it's a great origin story and the development of the character. He returns to Gotham, and he gradually evolves into the Batman, and faces off against Scarecrow and his machinations, as well as Ra's al Ghul's return, who turns out to be behind Scarecrow. Um, Ra's al Ghul gets killed at the end, and Batman carries on. I think that's about enough about that one. It's a bit dark. It's not the brightly coloured superhero movie of Superman, the Superman and Supergirl ones, or the Batman series, but the kind of darkness that's necessary to create the realistic sort of world, rather than the purely fictional world of previous iterations of Batman. Right, so that's that one. Now, I've seen the Dark Knight film, and it doesn't quite qualify to me as classic DC film, but it's well worth a watch. And the next one, I didn't feel that I feel that his character was a bit plodding in that one, and it's too long. And the Joker, although Heath Ledger was great as the Joker, I think that the definitive Joker was Jack Nicholson's earlier. But the last film of the trilogy, The Dark Knight Rises, fulfills all my expectations. It's a great superhero story. It has Bane. It has the duplicitous, ambiguous character of Catwoman, or Selina Kyle. She's not the villainess of the 60s series. Hardly at all. She's a jewel thief, yes. But she's not basically bad. This is great cinematography. It's not too dark. There's some daylight filming as well as the nighttime filming. The Batman sort of comes into the light, as it were. Great story of his struggle, his incarceration at the hands of Bane. He saves Gotham from being blown up by an atomic bomb. There are ideological matters and moral matters very well written and played out. What could I say? Almost a perfect movie, perhaps. Yeah. Ra's al Ghul's daughter is in it, seeking vengeance. She's against Bane's campaign and his seizing of Gotham. Okay. And he beats him in the end. And there's no Robin in the Christopher Nolan films. In a way, this is an Elseworld movie, I think. Very much an Elseworld movie in recent terms, to use recent terms, popular terms. Because he's an aging Batman, there's no Robin. But then at the end, there's a sort of implication that Robin's coming on the scene. When the young police officer character, who grew up in one of Bruce Wayne's boys' homes, sort of swings into finds the Batcave. Batman's disappeared. And he finds the Batcave, and just before that, a social security officer says, why don't you use your birth name, Robin? Because he's known as something Blake. I've forgotten his first name. Alfred's great in this and Batman Begins, and in The Dark Knight, of course, played by Michael Caine. Oh, and Anne Hathaway plays Catwoman. With George Fawcett with Batman, she sort of morphs into a Batgirl figure halfway through. Right. Another one which came out in between, during the making and releases of the Dark Knight trilogy, and it's this one. Now, I know people will be saying, shouting at the screen, oh, how can you put that in as a classic DC movie and not The Dark Knight? Well, it is for me. It didn't do well at the box office. I don't go on popularity in my ranking. And why didn't it do well at the box office? Well, because it was way ahead of its time. If this film would have been made exactly as it is, even, at around the time of the Wonder Woman and the Aquaman films, the Aquaman and the Wonder Woman films were made, I think it would have been much more successful. I don't know if you've seen the Aquaman film, for example. You notice this great CGI underwater world. This is some great CGI alien world, the world of Oa, of course. It deals with the grand story of the parallax, the fear, sort of fear parasite that threatens to overwhelm pretty much the entire universe and ends up coming to Earth. It has Michael Hammond, one of Green Lantern's main foes from the comic books. I've got showcase editions of Green Lantern comics as well. It adheres quite closely to the comics in so many ways. There's the whole thing about moral and ethical questions about being human, what it means to be human, what it means to be a hero. And although at first he was sort of sneered upon by the other Lanterns, his belief in humanity enables him to triumph where the other Lanterns have failed, and he destroys Parallax, of course. And then he's applauded and cheered near the end by all the other Lanterns. Great story, great effects, and what can I say? Almost a perfect superhero movie. Okay. Now, the next one is possibly, arguably, the greatest DC movie, Wonder Woman. Now, I watched the Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and Justice League avidly, but I found them disappointing for various reasons. Man of Steel was probably the best of the three, but it's not as good it's essentially a remake of the first two Christopher Reeves movies, and I didn't find it was as good. It was too heavy and stark. It wasn't as much fun, in other words. These films and TV shows all have to be fun. The Justice League movie, even if it was combined with the Zack Snyder cut, would still be disappointing, because you need quite a few members of the Justice League. You need a lot of members to make a good Justice League movie. I mean, there were only 5 in the movie, and one of them was dead till halfway through. I hope that's not too much of a spoiler if you haven't watched it. So you needed at least Martian Manhunter and Green Lantern and perhaps more, but they weren't there. And Batman v Superman was just dreadful in so many ways. One critic said on a documentary about the history of superheroes in film. She said they behave like petulant idiots. That's very true. The characters were lost. The morality and also the cleverness and the intelligence of the characters was lost in the ridiculous battle between Batman and Superman. Something that people wanted to see. But I mean, it's a silly idea anyway. I mean, unless he has a ton of kryptonite, which of course he had, Superman could blow him away quite literally. So Batman would necessarily lose. After they make friends, the story picks up quite well, or join forces. And Wonder Woman's great in it. And this, being a great women's lives matter, probably what it would be referred to these days, prominence of women film, the female director, Patty Jenkins, story of Wonder Woman, from Themyscira to World War One, and great cast of supporting characters, little band, a little team, if you like, commandos, sort of thing. Chris Pine, the love interest, and her struggle, if you like, in being a hero, what it means to be a hero, is very strong in this. Because she begins very naively. Because you wonder why there aren't any men in Themyscira. And I suppose there are, but you don't see any. And turns out that she's believed the Gooseberry Bush story about her birth. If it is indeed a Gooseberry Bush story, it's not clear what story, it's not clear. But she is the daughter of Zeus, the god Zeus, and the queen of the Amazons. And she's going after Ares. She thinks Ares is responsible for the war, which of course Chris Pine thinks is naive, but it turns out that Ares is present and whispering in the ear of the German general and his chemist to produce, get them to produce deadly gases. And of course she faces off against Ares in the end. So that's that. It's big, it's beautiful. Gal Gadot is gorgeous, and she's larger than life as Wonder Woman, of course. And it's quite humorous, it's fun in that sense. It's great fun to watch, they're all fun to watch. Green Lantern's got humour in it as well. Even the Dark Knight stories have humour in them. So, there I have it, Wonder Woman. Must. Of course, there were a couple of heroine films. Catwoman and Elektra. Catwoman being the DC and Elektra being the Marvel. But they weren't very good movies. In a way, they were female empowerment movies. But this is the movie. Classic character, classic movie. Wonder Woman. Okay. I'm going to jump forward a bit. I'm not going to look at the Aquaman movie, review the Aquaman movie, until the next video. Should have a glass of water, really. No. Till the next video, but I'm going to jump forward to Wonder Woman 1984. And this is a terrific movie. I'm going to do the Suicide Squad and other movies that went on in between. But because this is a sequel, I'm going to do this now. We'll look at this now. This is a great sequel, I don't care what anybody says. It's a big story, it has an interesting villain, it has great moral and ethical questions. Does Wonder Woman have the right to bring back the dead just because, she misses her boyfriend? Does she have the right to bring him back? Of course, in doing so, she's compromising her powers There's a sense of responsibility then. She would normally have the power to defeat the villain who's essentially interfering with everyone's desires everywhere in the world, giving people what they wish for. It's causing chaos. Um, there's also Cheetah, one of the main villainesses from the comics. Woman with the powers of a cheetah, big, huge, sort of very powerful character that she has to fight. And there's a great diatribe at the end when the character, I forget his name now. What's his name?